Welcome to History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. Osama bin Laden, then a little-known figure, appears among fellow Mujahideen fighters in Afghanistan during the Soviet invasion of 1988. The war drew foreign volunteers who viewed it as a struggle against occupation. This photograph captures a moment before global attention turned to the future leader of Al-Qaeda. A statue in Stavropolye depicts Joseph Stalin with agronomist Trofim Lysenko, a controversial figure who rejected genetics in favor of unproven theories. Stalin holds a symbolic wheat stalk, highlighting the regime's emphasis on agriculture. The monument reflected Soviet ideology, but also the political power of science shaped by authoritarian control. Young boys in Hubei, China, are shown training for military service during the Second Sino-Japanese War. With Japan's invasion threatening daily life, children were often drawn into national defense efforts. The image reflects the mobilization of society, where even the youngest were prepared to contribute to China's survival. An aerial photograph from 1923 shows the early stages of Grant Park Stadium's construction in Chicago. Later renamed Soldier Field, the arena would become one of America's most iconic sporting venues. Built to honor World War I soldiers, its monumental design reflected a nation eager to blend memory with modern sport. 4 U.S. Navy carriers, USS Saratoga, Enterprise, Hornet, and San Jacinto stand together at Alameda in 1945, representing 4 different classes. They highlight America's naval might at the end of World War II. Their presence signified both victory and the transition from wartime intensity to post-war strategy in the Pacific. In 1980, railway depots in East Germany still operated steam locomotives. Long retired in the West, enthusiasts from West Germany traveled to Saalfeld to witness the engines in action. The contrast revealed the technological divide of the Cold War, where nostalgia in the West was daily necessity in the East. A Minangkabau chieftain of West Sumatra stands with his entourage in the early 20th century, photographed under Dutch colonial rule. Wearing traditional attire, he embodies the enduring power of local leadership despite foreign administration. The portrait captures a moment of cultural resilience within the shifting tides of colonial authority. Exiled King Peter II of Yugoslavia inspects his royal guard in London on his 25th birthday in 1948. Having fled during World War II, he remained abroad as his monarchy was abolished back home. The ceremony reflected a king without a throne, but still clinging to symbolic sovereignty. Marshall Major Taylor, a pioneering African-American cyclist, achieved international fame by winning the 1-mile sprint in 1899. His victory in Montreal marked him as the first Black American world champion in cycling. Against racial barriers, Taylor's success became both a sporting triumph and a landmark in civil rights history. An ethnic German girl waits in a Czechoslovak transit camp in August 1946 before forced deportation. Millions of Germans were expelled from Eastern Europe after World War II as borders shifted. Her expression reflects the uncertainty of countless civilians uprooted in one of the largest population movements of the century. A Hungarian revolutionary named Josip Broz Tito holds an AK-47 seized from Soviet forces during the 1956 uprising. Citizens rose against communist control, briefly gaining ground before being crushed by military intervention. The weapon, captured from the occupiers, became a powerful symbol of defiance and fleeting hope for freedom. Yugoslav leader Josip Broz Tito smokes a pipe at a Belgrade party in 1960. Tito maintained a careful balance between East and West during the Cold War, carving an independent path for Yugoslavia. The relaxed image contrasts with his role as a shrewd statesman managing a complex federation of nations. In the 1960s, Iranian health corps nurses instructed rural women in methods of birth control. Part of modernization efforts, these campaigns aim to improve public health and address population growth. The image reflects a society in transition, where tradition met new ideas introduced through state-driven modernization projects. Tourists and guides climb the rough stone blocks of an Egyptian pyramid in the late 1800s. At the time, such visits were informal, with little restriction on access. The photo shows an era when ancient monuments were approached casually, long before modern conservation and tourism management took hold. In Nevada, 1957, a blimp is torn apart by the shockwave of a nuclear blast. The U.S. conducted numerous atmospheric tests during this period, seeking to understand the destructive power of atomic weapons. The fragile airship's destruction highlights both the raw force of the explosion and the era's relentless experimentation. A Civil War-era photograph captures General William Tecumseh Sherman in military uniform around 1865. Known for his harsh march to the sea, Sherman became one of the Union's most influential commanders. This side-profile portrait presents a man both celebrated for strategic brilliance and criticized for the devastation his campaigns left behind. In 1888, the Eiffel Tower rises above Paris as construction nears completion. Work began in 1887 and would finish in 1889, unveiling a landmark initially criticized as an eyesore. The photograph records not only engineering ambition, but also the beginning of an icon that would later define France itself. Stefan Bobrovsky, known as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, is pictured around 1910. Born with hypertrichosis, he grew a mane-like covering of hair across his face and body. Performing in circuses, he captivated audiences across Europe and America. His story reflects both human curiosity and the exploitation of physical difference in entertainment. In 1966, Life magazine captured U.S. Marines aiding a wounded comrade, Gunnery Sergeant Jeremiah Purdy, during Operation Prairie in Vietnam. Taken by Larry Burroughs, the image became one of the war's defining photographs. It illustrates both the brutal cost of combat and the enduring bonds of soldiers under fire. Krakow's Alika W. Gertrudi Street appears in a 1960 photograph by Harrison Foreman. The scene captures everyday life in post-war Poland, with trams, pedestrians, and old buildings lining the street. It offers a glimpse of a city recovering from destruction, yet still carrying the weight of its historic past. During Operation Boleus in 1998, South African forces intervened in Lesotho to stabilize unrest. A soldier is seen addressing the cameraman while under enemy fire, capturing the immediacy of conflict. The image reflects both the dangers of peacekeeping operations and the tension of a region struggling for political stability. In 1941, German soldiers test the gallows before executing suspected Soviet partisans. Such scenes were part of the brutal occupation across Eastern Europe, where resistance was met with swift and public punishment. The chilling image reveals the mechanics of terror used to enforce control and crush local opposition. On April 28, 1945, Soviet and American troops met at the Elbe River, marking a symbolic union against Nazi Germany. Soldiers from both sides are shown shaking hands, bridging vast cultural and political divides. The meeting symbolized cooperation at the war's end, even as the Cold War soon approached. Snow blankets the ski resort of Val d'Isère in 1970, turning the French Alps into a white paradise. The heavy winter snowfall attracted tourists and professional skiers alike, reinforcing the village's growing reputation as one of Europe's premier alpine destinations. The photo captures both leisure and the power of nature. Mikhail Petrovich Devyatov, a Soviet fighter pilot, became a legend for his daring escape from a Nazi concentration camp. Stealing a German He-111 bomber, he flew himself and fellow prisoners to freedom. Once distrusted, he was later recognized in 1957 with the Hero of the Soviet Union Award. In February 1946, Chinese laborers returned home from wartime conscription aboard the victory ship Cushman K. Davis. Children, many of whom had never seen their ancestral homeland, boarded the gangplank in Manila. Organized by the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, the voyage symbolized post-war displacement and the hope of return. In 1945, President Harry Truman examined Herman Göring's diamond-encrusted baton outside the White House, accompanied by Generals Alexander Patch and Lucian Truscott. The captured artifact symbolized the fall of Nazi leadership. The moment reflected both triumph and the uneasy weight of responsibility in shaping a new post-war order. In 1972, the Bugojno group attempted to ignite rebellion in Yugoslavia. Comprised of Croat ultranationalists, some returning from exile in Australia, they carried weapons stolen from American bases in West Germany. The plot was quickly crushed, but it revealed the lingering tensions that haunted Tito's fragile federation. Albert DeSalvo, the man who confessed to being the Boston Strangler, was rearrested in Massachusetts after escaping from Bridgewater State Hospital in 1967. His brief escape reignited public fear. Though later doubts emerged about his guilt, at the time his capture closed a chilling chapter in American criminal history. In 2004, Jonathan Jack Idema stood trial in Afghanistan wearing sunglasses. Claiming he was on a personal mission to track Osama bin Laden, he instead tortured Afghan civilians into false confessions. Once hailed by some as a maverick, he was exposed as a fraud whose actions deepened local suffering. A museum worker in Alabama demonstrates the bell rack in 1937, a brutal device once used to stop enslaved people from running away. The collar held bells that revealed movement, making escape nearly impossible. Its display served as a stark reminder of the cruelty embedded in America's past. In September 1938, during the Sudetenland crisis, a French reservist shared a farewell kiss with his wife before mobilization. Europe stood on the edge of war, and families faced uncertain futures. The moment captured both intimate love and the looming shadow of a global conflict that would soon erupt. At Wrigley Field in Chicago, 1937, ivy was planted along the brick outfield walls. The decision by team president Bill Veeck transformed the ballpark into one of baseball's most recognizable landmarks. The creeping vines would grow into a living symbol of tradition and charm, unique in Major League history. In 1969, a 24-year-old Eric Clapton was photographed outside Olympic Studios during a recording session with Blind Faith, the short-lived supergroup featuring Clapton, Steve Winwood, and Ginger Baker, produced only one album. This image captures the energy of a young musician at the height of the rock revolution. An outtake from the 1945 meeting between General Douglas MacArthur and Emperor Hirohito shows both men caught mid-expression. MacArthur blinked and Hirohito's mouth was open, leading to its rejection for publication. The alternate frame remains a candid glimpse of two figures at the center of Japan's surrender. In March 1938, Austrian and German officials removed a border barrier during the Anschluss. The annexation of Austria into Nazi Germany was celebrated by many but marked the erosion of independence. The simple act of dismantling the barrier symbolized the collapse of sovereignty under Hitler's expansionist ambitions. A 1934 newspaper feature documented London's Limehouse slums, notorious for overcrowding and poverty. The district, home to immigrants and dock workers, became a focal point of social concern. Photographs and reports highlighted the stark contrast between wealth and deprivation in Britain's capital during a decade of deep economic struggle. During the Apollo 15 mission in 1971, astronauts photographed Earth rising over the Moon's horizon. The image emphasized both the vastness of space and the fragility of our planet. Like earlier Earthrise photographs, it inspired a deeper sense of global unity and environmental awareness back on Earth. In January 1965, Wernher von Braun drove a prototype lunar roving vehicle at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. The test represented early efforts to design equipment for future moon missions. Once a German rocket engineer, von Braun became central to America's space program, bridging wartime technology and peaceful exploration. A traditional wedding in Subcarpathian Ruthenia, photographed between the 1920s and 1930s, reflects the customs of a rural Czechoslovak community. Dressed in regional attire, the couple and their families preserved age-old traditions despite modern change. The photo captures both the celebration of union and the endurance of cultural identity. In August 2005, New Orleans residents used boats and wooden planks to navigate streets flooded by Hurricane Katrina. The storm overwhelmed levees, leaving much of the city underwater. The image shows resilience amid devastation, as survivors adapted to a transformed landscape marked by destruction, loss, and uncertainty. Cesare Mori, the Iron Prefect, was photographed in the 1920s. Ordered by Mussolini to eradicate the mafia, he carried out sweeping campaigns with uncompromising force. Conducting over 11,000 arrests, Mori weakened organized crime, but also reinforced fascist control. His methods made him both a symbol of order and repression. In 1925, Benito Mussolini rode in a car with his pet lion, Ras. The unusual display emphasized his desire to project power, dominance, and personal myth. Images like this fed propaganda, shaping Mussolini's cult of personality as both a modern leader and a figure of theatrical bravado. In August 1989, nearly 2 million people joined hands to form a human chain across the Baltic states. The demonstration stretched hundreds of miles through Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Known as the Baltic Way, it became one of the largest peaceful protests against Soviet control in history. In 1963, Pope Paul VI became the last pontiff crowned with the papal tiara. The ornate three-tiered crown symbolized papal authority as Father of Kings, Governor of the World, and Vicar of Christ. His decision to end coronations marked a shift toward humility and modernization within the Catholic Church. In 1967, LT Kal, Ontong Shamsuri stood before an execution pole in Indonesia. A coup attempt 2 years earlier, blamed on communists, had failed and unleashed violent purges. His punishment symbolized the regime's determination to suppress dissent and reassert control through fear and retribution. In 1940, a portrait was taken of a West African sailor serving in the French Navy at Dakar. Colonial troops played a vital role in France's war effort, often fighting far from their homelands. The photograph reflects the reach of empire and the human cost of global conflict. In October 1928, Czechoslovak President Tomáš Masaryk addressed crowds during the nation's 10th anniversary celebrations. A founding figure of the Republic, Masaryk embodied democratic ideals at a time when Europe's political climate was increasingly unstable. His speech symbolized national pride and the fragile optimism of a young state. Rows of SBD, dauntless dive bombers, lined the Douglas aircraft plant in California in 1943. Built for the U.S. Navy, these aircraft played a decisive role in the Pacific War, most famously at Midway. The photo highlights America's immense industrial power fueling the Allied war effort. Inside Hitler's bunker in Berlin, 1945, a haunting photograph captures the aftermath of the Third Reich's collapse. The claustrophobic rooms bore silent witness to the regime's final days, where Hitler and his closest followers chose death over surrender. The image remains a chilling reminder of dictatorship's destructive end.